Okay, so now that the engine is done, I've put it in place on the frame. I went ahead and hooked the frame back up to the ratchet straps and lowered the frame to the ground over the engine, and then put in the engine mount bolts. Got 4 in the front here, and then there are 2 in the back. Got 1 right there, and then 1 down here on the bottom. So the engine is now in place in the frame. And I also went ahead and put the top of the triple tree on. Just got it on semi-tight, not completely tight, just because I need to get the forks in. And once the forks are lined up, then just tighten down the big nut here on the top to get the triple tree all lined up. So the next step is to actually get the frame and the engine now off the ground a little bit, and then put the rear stand on the bike, and maybe a little front end or a little rear end. So that way I can take the rear strap off and then allow the bike to pivot kind of on the rear stand, and then put the front end together. So in this video I'll be putting together the front end and the rear end, and then getting the bike back on its 2 wheels and ready to be in place. So that's the next step here in rebuilding the bike and getting it all put back together. But looking good so far. So I'm getting the rear end put in. I put the rear swing arm in with the brake lever and obviously the rear stand. And as I was doing that, I was like, okay, well, I'm probably going to want to put the shocks on. And I got these really cool new reservoir shocks. So I'm going to put the shocks on so I can get the rear wheel on at some point. And I got these ones with the reservoir because you can adjust them, and they also look super cool, all blacked out. And they go on the shock mount right here. They slip right on there, but the only problem is there's not enough angle for them to go back because of this helmet lock, which is a total bummer. You can see it won't go back enough to line up in position. It's a total bummer, so I'm gonna have to cut that off. There's just this one rivet here, so I'm gonna have to get a small Dremel cutting wheel, cut that off, and then take this lock off, which bums me out because I was hoping to be able to keep that on. Might be able to find another spot for it if I move it back further on the frame, but I'll have to wait and see until I put everything else back together. But this is gonna have to come off to make room for the shocks to go in. So that's gonna be the next thing, is now cutting that off and then painting underneath here so everything looks uniform. The helmet lock taken off. I started grinding it. It turns out actually that's screwed into there with some sort of weird rivet looking screw. So I was able to get that off. Like I said, I might try to relocate it just a little bit further back, maybe to that hole. But now the shock will actually be able to fit in place here. So ran into one other problem. The rubber bushing that sits on here is too fat once I put it on the post. So I cannot get this shock on for the life of me. And actually what I did on the other side, and I'll show you guys in a second, is I actually cut off some of this rubber to create more of a tapered head as opposed to this wide head that sticks out here that makes it hard to get it into the shock. Cut some of that down, and then the shock slipped right on, and all I did was put the shock on and then tighten it down and it slipped right on. So I'm going to fade into another video showing you guys how to cut that up. What I did was just take a razor blade, and this looks kind of choppy, but it works, and there's enough rubber left on there for the shock to sit on. So now it doesn't have that wide tapered head. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just slip this on the shock post, and it's easy to get on when you put some grease on there. I'm going to put some more grease on. Let's get some grease. Put some grease on there like that. And now the shock will be able to slip right on when I tighten it down. Got the shock lined up. As you can see, it's still loose. Put the flat washer on first, small washer on second, and then the stock chrome shock cap that came with it. And as you can see, I'm just finger tightening it down now, and it's already starting to slip on. And then all you got to do is just pop this guy on. You can start to see boom. Shock is on. And then the only other thing at the bottom is the small lower mount which you just twist into place. Gotta get it threaded in. There we go. Okay, rear shocks are installed. So I did the same thing to both sides. Creating that taper made that way easier to get the upper part of the shocks installed. Looks nice and clean, beautiful looking shocks. Now I can put the rear wheel back in. Alright, there we have the rear end completely reassembled. Just need to adjust everything still. I haven't put the chain on or anything, so the tensioners aren't tight, brake stuff, all that, but looks great. I really like those shocks, going with that all black look again. So everything's put back together pretty much here on the rear end, and now I'm starting to work on the front, as you can see right over there. What is handy with this build is I have my buddy's 1978 CB400 Hawk right there. Same motor, so it's really nice to be able to go back and forth and kind of take a look at mine as I reassemble it here. So looking good, almost back together on the front and the rear. Okay, so we'll call this the end of reassembly day 1. Got the rear end completely put together, shocks and everything, talked about that a little while ago, and then I also went ahead and did the front end. So before I put the wheels and stuff back on, I actually cleaned them using degreaser and then also polished the aluminum rims, or the aluminum part of the rims I should say, using a Dremel tool first to kind of clean it up, and then just use some mag wheel polish to clean them up. Some of the touches that I kind of did here was with the speedometer gear. I actually left the aluminum color, and polished that up. And then, so it kind of gives it that black, then silver kind of look. And then also the caliper, the brake caliper, I took that apart and also painted that black to match as well. So the front forks came together nicely. Got the Honda emblem, which is usually chrome. I painted that all black. Looks pretty cool. And then I also set the forks up a little bit higher here because my lady's going to be riding it. To try to give it a little bit lower ride. It's just about a ½ inch or so from the flush setting of where it normally is. I stuck the old bars on just for now to be able to move it around as I continue to work on it. But looks pretty good for first assembly.